I've been in and out of penitentiary about 10, 15 times, man. I got about 30 years in there. It's gonna be a difference in the way they treat them when they come out of prison because, you know, a lot of people in society still look at a prisoner when he's being released as still a criminal.
I think we've made it incredibly difficult for people who have done a crime or been convicted of a crime to re-enter society. I think that we need to provide resources for them to get jobs. I think we need to provide resources for people to be educated in our communities and how to help them adjust to coming back into society and to finding ways to connect with their community.
Welcome to Everyday Grace TV, where there's story, there's grace. My name is Jay Locklear, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about coming back, specifically coming back from being incarcerated and re-entering into society. You're going to hear stories about transformation. You're going to hear stories about relationships. Most importantly, you're going to hear stories of grace. So thank you for being with us and watching this episode. Coming up, our first interview was brought to us by Margaret Brunson.
Today we are in Durham, North Carolina at the City Well Church talking about prison ministry with our guests Amanda Mariner, Erin Roesch, and Sandi Velez. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about prison ministry, and our hope is that you will share your stories about your passion for prison ministry and, just tell our guests some compelling stories about why you're in prison ministry and where you've seen God's grace. And so we are going to have a great conversation today, and I'm excited to speak with each one of you. So why prison ministry? Why and how did you get involved in prison ministry?
I feel I've had a front row seat all my life of the challenges at living in projects, living in low income areas, and so many of my childhood friends that I grew up with that sadly got in that revolving door in and out of prison due to addiction, due to, just young and stupid decisions. As a teenager, I myself found myself in juvie court, So that's where it started for me. Then later on, as a career, I was an investigator with the Federal Defender's Office. And so there for almost 10 years for the Southern District of Florida, and I'm ever thankful, which allowed me to understand the harmful minimum mandatory sentences that came with the drug sentences and the other charges, such as convicted felons in possession of a firearm, though these statutes were well-intended. In application, they've done a lot of harm. And so as God provided a space for me later on in life to do volunteer work in prison ministry, that I feel He equipped me with not just the passion, but the understanding and wisdom. And I'm grateful because I've seen a lot of wonderful victories. And
I'm sure
services. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, and we're going to hopefully hear about some of that in a few minutes.
Yes.
So Erin and Amanda, I also want to hear from you. Why prison ministry? Why and how did you get involved?
I was going into seminary, and I felt called to work on the margins where I feel like the church experiences God the most. Not necessarily that the church brings God there, but that's where Jesus already is. And I remember a professor saying, Matthew 25 isn't multiple choice. So often we want to think that, clothing the naked and feeding the hungry, but the visiting the prisoner, I don't think you just get to choose. And so I was sitting in this class thinking, I'm going to flunk the test. And the achiever in me just said, I wonder what it would be like to go inside a prison. And so I had the opportunity through a professor to go on the inside. And I describe prisons as, I didn't choose to be in prison ministry. And even really, my professional work is in reentry now. At the time, that wasn't my plan. It was actually while I was in there, I had an opportunity to help with a worship service. They just needed someone to read scripture. And I read, and the men, it was at Butner Federal Correctional Facility, were so affirming of me after the service that I felt actually more affirmed in God's church on the inside than I did on the outside. And at the time, I was exploring a call to ministry, and it was them that said, yes, you're called. And so they kind of chose me. And it was simply that I wanted to hang out with them more that I went back. And they've been a gift to my life. And many of the sermons that I've had to preach for the Board of Ordained Ministry or in my particular faith tradition, I actually preached to them first to get their feedback.
Test it out.
Before I would actually preach to the folks that are going to be giving me a grade, because they were more authentic, they were honest and affirming of what God was doing in my life. And I could see very clearly what God was doing in theirs.
Well, mine's definitely different. I got it from the inside perspective. I grew up in Cary, so went to college, quit school, and met my boyfriend, got together, and I went to prison for 16 years. And when I went to prison and going through that, growing up in Cary, it was very white privilege, and I'd never heard those words till prison. I get in prison, and I find, number one, that for the first time, my parents can't help me. My parents can't save me. Their name, their money is nothing. And so then it was me and the four walls. And it was then that I turned to God. I grew up in the church. I didn't have a personal relationship with God. And I didn't realize that till I went inside and realized that, I would hear women who were like praying and calling out to him. And I was like, what? And, I just felt I was born a Christian. My family was a Christian. I went to church. We were good. We were moral. We, were the higher ups. We were good. So there, I learned that my family, nobody could help me. And it was God that helped me. It was when I called out to God that he helped me. And it was like, I need a personal relationship with him. And so that was my first yearning to let me read the Bible again. Let me do everything I thought I knew. I obviously didn't know, so let me start over. And then when I was in prison, people were like, you have to go to Kairos. You have to go to Kairos. Everyone was talking about Kairos. Kairos is an amazing, I'm pretty sure it's definitely international, worldwide prison organization, ministry organization. And it's these women who come together, women and men, it's in the men and women's prison, and it's a 4-day weekend. And you were in the prison gymnasium. They had transformed it to where you did not feel like you were in the prison gym. They brought in food, you sat at tables, and they just loved on you. And it was, it is so it is the one ministry that I definitely feel God's hands are all in it, because everyone has a weekend that goes through their weekend. And so my weekend, all these people came in, and all I saw was these white privileged folks coming in. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna look down on us. But then they get up and they share their stories, and their stories of being beaten, their stories of drugs. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it was just so awakening to think that here we were still judging folks. And it was like, they're just like us. It's okay. Where I was isolated and thought nobody had problems, it was like, dude, who isn't touched by some type, I don't want to say necessarily crime, but some type of hard knock story that we just obviously, in the environment I grew up in, we all hide it. Nobody talks about it. And to see it all out there, it was like, wow.
Well, that's why it's so powerful for us to share our stories, because I think so many times we make assumptions and we assume that people are one way without hearing about who they are. And I really like the part of your story where you said you found yourself behind four walls. I thought about how in church sometimes we say like we have to take the church beyond the four walls. And it's interesting that you ended up in your own personal church, like within four walls, where, you know, God was the only one that could get to you behind those walls. And I think that's very powerful. I have a very powerful image in my mind with that. What are some moments, or share some stories that really have shown you like the power of prison ministry and left you feeling like you were doing the right thing and that you were in the right place?
I wouldn't know Amanda if it wasn't for prison ministry. I actually met Amanda on the inside because we were classmates in something called Project Turn. And we were taking, I think it was Sin in Redemption and North American Literature. So we took a literature class together, which is a very unique program that Duke Divinity School offers, where professors will actually teach a credited course on the inside, and the class is half seminary students and half residents. And so I got to meet Amanda there, but the exciting part of it was being able to carry that relationship through on the outside. So my professional work is actually in reentry, which I think is as important as the church being present on the inside. The church must be present on the outside as a welcoming space.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that while inside, so like we all, and when I say we, I mean like all my friends and people who really weren't my friends that I met while inside, we learned that we needed to come to prison and that we all found God. And, you know, you get that label or you hear the word thrown around of jailhouse convert or they're just a jailhouse convert. Well, you know, that actually might be true, and it's a beautiful thing. And like, because it's, for whatever reason, we needed to be isolated. We needed to get into the four walls where it was just us, God, and the four walls, to hear him, to see him move in our lives, to see what he had done. And like for me, I tell people, I met all my judgments in prison. Everything I was taught to look down upon, or that wasn't good, or to be afraid of this, or not to like this, I met every single one of those. Literally anything I could have thought of that was like, and that I couldn't love, or God didn't mean for me to love this person, I met. And I heard their story. I heard their backstory. I heard how they came to the same place I did. And I realized that the ones I had judged had more authenticity about them, had more honesty, morals, ethics, had been through so much more than me. And it's like, I was looking down on you. You're so much better than I am. So it was there that I learned to love, because I then learned everyone's got a story. Every person I meet, there's something about them I don't know that has made them that way. Who am I to judge? Who am I? You know, my story brought me to where I was. You know, you get loved on so well while you're inside the churches. Every church comes in, people bring in food. Everybody loves you while you're in. And you get out, and the love stops. And that's where, like, when I hear the word prison ministry, I have to, like, kind of push through, because I want to cringe. I'm like, prison ministry is horrible. I don't want to hear that word ever again. Because you love on me while I'm in, and some places, some ministries, they make you feel like you're their ticket to salvation. They're checking off the Matthew 25. I visited somebody in prison. I shared the gospel with somebody in prison. I'm going to heaven. I saved their sin wretched soul. And it's like, yeah, I did a horrible thing. I am not a bad person. You know, please don't characterize me by the worst mistake I ever did. And, you know, sometimes it wasn't, that wasn't necessarily the worst mistake that I may have credited myself to doing. And so then I get out, and I can't get housing because I'm a felon. I can't get a job because I'm a felon. That didn't necessarily, I was blessed enough that I got a work release job on the inside. I did well enough. I proved myself. They hired me on the outside, but I'm definitely the minority on that. And so, and even then when I wasn't getting paid enough to live, it was like, I can't get another job. I have to be thankful for this. And then, so where was the prison ministries? Where were this? Nobody was offering to bring me in. Nobody was offering me, I'll vouch for you. It was the Project Turn, John Wilson Hartgrove, and the Root House that was like, we'll take you in. And I was like, what? And, they didn't ask any questions. They had kids and they trusted me around their kids. And it was just like, wow. And that community supported me. That was them, and Kairos are the only two programs that have walked with me outside. And I tell, the Duke Divinity, Project Turn, that's like the people I give the shout outs to, because in class with Erin, I felt I'll never see her again. And, so who cares what she thinks of me? And we wrote papers and I gave my soul. I told, numerous things that I thought were the worst things I'd ever done. And yet Erin still wanted to hang out with me. Erin, there was and it wasn't just Erin. There was 3 or 4 people that I felt like, y'all are hounding me. Give me a break. And let's go get some coffee. Let's go take a walk. And it's like, they really want to hang out with me. I was able to carry Erin from the inside to the out, because we all talk about how we transformed. God made us anew in there. And to be able to come out, and it's like you come out with all this energy and we're loved on and we're great people and people can see past this. And then you realize, oh, that's not really true. They can come in and do it, but coming outside, no, you're still that felon. And you get marked with that every day. And to just have to suck it up, but then to have the strength. I was able to call Erin, I'm having a really bad moment. And I think you're really the only person that can understand. You're the only friend I have in Durham.
Our lives need to always be done at the impulse of God's love, which means that to do something at the impulse of God's love is to look like Jesus in everything that we do. And Jesus tells this story of this prodigal son. You might know it in Luke's gospel. And Jesus tells a story about how this father's posture is when his son comes home from his internal spiritual prison. And the father betrays all social convention. And it says that the father runs to his son, which is typically lost to people that in Middle Near Eastern culture, it was considered almost a disgrace for a grown man to be ever seen running. And it says that when he sees his son from afar off, he runs. And I think that if we're going to be like Jesus when it comes to people who are coming out of prison, whether truly like Butner or the prisons of their own lives, we better put on our running shoes.
Welcome to Everyday Grace TV. My name is Jay Locklear, and today we are in Apex, North Carolina, and we've come to visit and to talk with Holland Steen. Holland, thank you so much for letting us have this time. Why don't you go ahead and tell our folks a little bit of your story, maybe where you've come from, a little bit of what happened to you, and kind of where you are today.
Appreciate you guys having me. I think the key was I had a pretty average, normal life growing up. Nothing really bad happened. But the key was that God was there, but I wasn't seeing him my whole life. And then I had to go to a place like prison to find God. In prison, I met people who really came in, and I was doing the same thing over and over again. Wasn't really motivated. I didn't have ambitions. I didn't keep a schedule.
Right.
But after Mike and Kevin came and showed me the life they were living and a life I wanted to live, and God showed himself through them to me, I started waking up. I started reading the Bible. I started working out. I overall became a better person. My parents saw a better person. And it's gone much more than that, because obviously I've been out now almost a year, and I continue. Things just keep happening, and I don't really know why they're happening, but they're good, and God is looking out for me, and I have great jobs and great relationships. But it all happened from the initial people who came in to speak with me, showed me a life worth living, and now I'm able every day to better myself and continue to try to live that life because of their initial act.
Yeah, it sounds like relationship has been a huge part of this transformation, and those you had some good relationships before, but it was nothing that you took advantage of. Maybe you felt like you didn't need to, but now it's crucial, those relationships.
I guess you could say that I would not judge them, but I felt like they were judging me. I didn't want to say they knew where I'd been or they couldn't relate to me. And these guys came in and one of them had been incarcerated, and I kind of had to respect him for that and the life he was living now. And he came in and he had a keychain with a nice logo on the keychain, and it was kind of inspiring to say he went to prison and he has a wife now and he drives a nice car. So there's hope.
Right.
And hope was it was not in prison. There's no hope in prison. And he gave me hope to not just give up on life and not get out and go right back, like we all know happens many times. And even if you're down on yourself, to just keep going, and it will work out as long as you keep God in your hindsights, and you just keep doing what he wants you to do and just keep trying.
Say a little bit more about what it means for somebody to know you, not just to think that they know you, or they look at your situation and they just make assumptions. What does it mean for somebody to know who you are, or to know what you've been through?
It means a lot, because even today I have a problem, and I don't show it, but I do internally feel like people judge. And so to allow someone to come in and be able to say that I know you and I've been where you've been, and just to be able to completely relate to me, I was like, it was just a really nice feeling to say I don't have to hide my tattoos from this guy, or I don't have to watch my mouth. And it was just very nice and relaxing to finally be able to say, you know what, I'm going to come as I am, and you're going to accept me for that. But not only that, but you're going to love me for who I am, and then you're going to try to make me a better person after all that is said and done.
Yeah. That's a beautiful story. We thank you for taking the time to share that with us. We say all the time on Everyday Grace TV, where there's story, there's grace, and we've certainly heard that today. Again, we're grateful to Holland for sharing that story, for being so open, so candid with us, and we hope that in his story, you have found grace as well. Thanks for watching.
I think as a society, we should embrace them back into the community, give them the benefit of the doubt. They have paid their debt because they're out now. You know what I mean? Like, kind of give them that second chance, third chance, however,
125 times. Yep, 125 times. How do we hide from something that's mentioned in the Bible 125 times? But hide we do, and there it is. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, over and over again, we read about it. Prisons, prisoners. But we hide. Where are these places? Who are these people? In the New Testament language, there are 4 different words that get translated prison. Each of these words gives us a slightly different lens through which to look at this topic, slightly different ways of thinking about those who are in prison. Let's take a quick look at each of these words. None of them represents what we in our healthy moments would want for ourselves. In fact, one of the words for prison literally means delivered up. That is, taken somewhere you don't want to be. The most frequently used word for prison means watched. Where is privacy? Where is freedom? Where is confidentiality? All of these are gone when I am watched. And another word is close to that. It literally means guarded. Not in the sense of being protected, but in the sense of boundaries, fences, limits. And the fourth word that gets translated prison means a place of bondage, a place of capture. In these conversations today, we've talked mostly about the physical prisons our society erects. Truth to tell, some folks who walk the streets freely live in self-imposed prisons, or prisons of relationships, or prisons of illness. But that's another story for another day. Let me come at it this way. Have you ever wanted to see Jesus? Would you like to sit down at supper tonight and tell your family, I was with Jesus today? Well, our Lord tells us how to do just that. He mentioned several possibilities, and as a retired pastor, I'm sorry to say that none of them mentions hymn books or tall steeples. Instead, Jesus says, if you want to get with me, feed the hungry, welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, visit the prisoner. Jesus says, that's where you will find me. What you do to these folks, you've done to me. Look it up. Look it up in the 25th chapter of Matthew. Two of those things that Jesus mentioned really jump out at me today. One, visiting the prisoner, so that this child of God is not forgotten, not simply put away on a shelf, not reduced in value. But the other, and in some ways more difficult instruction of Jesus, is to welcome the stranger. From what I've heard in today's conversations, in some ways, not being welcomed when a released prisoner comes as a stranger carries its own special pain that even incarceration did not inflict. I think most do consider support of the prisoner as part of the good things to do in life. For those in the faith community, it's even an expression of faith. But this other part, this welcoming the stranger, may well define how we relate to those who are now free from prison. What stigma blocks us from seeing them? What uncomfortableness keeps us from risking a friendship? What is so strange that we would rather stay at a distance rather than giving hospitality to Jesus? In the book of Acts, there's a strange and powerful story about some prisoners, how they got put into prison, what happened while they were there, and what happened when they were released. The prisoners are Paul and Silas, who got arrested for challenging a money-making venture that took advantage of a young slave girl. Paul and Silas were stripped naked, beaten, and had their feet put into stocks so they could not move around. Well, Paul and Silas did the best they could in that situation. They actually sang and prayed. I think it's significant. I think it is significant that persons in prison still have gifts to give others. Gifts of kindness, gifts of prayer, gifts of faith, gifts of support. But in this story in Acts, suddenly, boom! There was an earthquake and the doors flew open and the chains got unfastened. And the guard who was in charge saw what had happened and knew what his punishment would be for letting those folks escape. So he started to kill himself. Paul called out to him, "Not to worry, we're all here, not to worry." The guard was so moved by this act of grace that he begged to learn how he might have the same spirit. Paul's witness was such that the guard and his whole household became believers. And when the guard told his boss what had happened, the head man said, "Let those prisoners go." Paul said, "No. You arrested us in public. You beat us in public. You should let us go, not in secret, but in public." And that's what happened. Do you see the remarkable way in which these prisoners ministered to others? Do you see the way that these prisoners had the strong sense of justice and fairness? Do you see how lives were changed, both prisoner and guard, because the power of Jesus was in that place? Do you see new life both within and outside the prison? So be it.